Question 1. An organization is pioneering a new bioplastic manufacturing technique that involves several distinct reaction phases, some of which generate low-level, sporadic emissions of specific volatile organic compounds, VOC. To comply with the Environmental Performance Assessment Guidelines of ISO 14030, 2019, which data collection methodology will be most appropriate for accurately characterizing these intermittent and potentially reactive VOC emissions? Option A. Passive sampling, using sorbent media to capture time-weighted average concentrations over extended periods. Option B. Remote sensing technology utilizing infrared spectroscopy to detect VOC plumes from a distance. Option C. Manual grab sampling with immediate on-site gas chromatography analysis for each emission event. Option D. Continuous emission monitoring using highly sensitive direct reading instruments at every emission point. The correct answer is A. Passive sampling using sorbent media to capture time-weighted average concentrations over extended periods. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations. A crucial aspect of this assessment is the reliable collection of environmental data. The standard emphasizes the importance of selecting appropriate data collection methods based on the specific environmental aspect being measured, the required level of accuracy, and the available resources. When evaluating a novel process for synthesizing a biodegradable polymer, an organization needs to capture data on volatile organic compound, VOC, emissions. The process involves several reaction stages, some of which are intermittent and produce low concentrations of specific VOCs. Continuous monitoring using direct reading instruments might be overly sensitive and costly for the intermittent, low concentration emissions, potentially leading to data overload or missing subtle but significant trends. Grab sampling followed by laboratory analysis offers a more targeted approach. However, if the VOCs are highly reactive or have a short half-life in ambient conditions, the sample integrity could be compromised between collection and analysis, leading to inaccurate results. Passive sampling, using sorbent tubes or badges that collect VOCs over a defined period, is often suitable for intermittent emissions and can provide a time-weighted average concentration. This method is generally less intrusive and can capture a broader range of compounds compared to active sampling with limited pump capacity. Furthermore, passive sampling can be cost-effective for monitoring multiple locations or for longer durations, which is beneficial for understanding the overall emission profile of a new process. Therefore, considering the intermittent nature and potential reactivity of the VOCs, passive sampling offers a robust and practical method for collecting representative data for the Environmental Performance Assessment under ISO 14030, 2019. This approach aligns with the standard's emphasis on data quality and fitness for purpose in environmental performance evaluation, ensuring that the collected data accurately reflects the process's impact. Question 2. A chemical processing plant operating under stringent environmental regulations like the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive (WIDE) discharges treated wastewater into a local river. Analysis of the discharge reveals the presence of elevated levels of phosphates and nitrates, which are byproducts of their manufacturing process. This discharge is a direct result of their operational activities. Recent ecological surveys of the river downstream from the plant have documented a significant increase in algal blooms and a decrease in dissolved oxygen levels, leading to a decline in fish populations. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019, for assessing environmental performance, how should the presence of phosphates and nitrates in the discharged wastewater be categorized in relation to the observed algal blooms and reduced dissolved oxygen? Option A. The environmental performance assessment would primarily focus on the ecological changes, categorizing the discharge itself as a minor contributing factor rather than a distinct aspect. Option B. Both the discharge of phosphates and nitrates and the subsequent ecological changes are classified as environmental impacts, signifying direct environmental consequences. Option C. The observed algal blooms and reduced dissolved oxygen are considered environmental aspects, as they represent potential interactions with the environment. Option D. The presence of phosphates and nitrates in the discharged wastewater is an environmental aspect, while the resulting algal blooms and reduced dissolved oxygen are environmental impacts. The correct answer is D. The presence of phosphates and nitrates in the discharged wastewater is an environmental aspect, while the resulting algal blooms and reduced dissolved oxygen are environmental impacts. Explanation: the core principle for distinguishing environmental aspects from environmental impacts, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, lies in the cause and effect relationship. An environmental aspect is an element of an organization's activities, products, or services that can interact with the environment. This interaction is the potential for change. An environmental impact, conversely, is the actual change, whether adverse or beneficial, wholly or partly resulting from an organization's environmental aspects. In the context of a manufacturing facility releasing wastewater containing specific chemical compounds, the release of these compounds into a water body is the environmental aspect. The subsequent degradation of water quality, harm to aquatic life, or potential contamination of downstream drinking water sources are the environmental impacts. The aspect is the action or potential for interaction, while the impact is the consequence of that interaction. Therefore, identifying the specific chemical constituents in the effluent and their direct release into the aquatic ecosystem constitutes the aspect, whereas the measurable alteration of the ecosystem's health or composition is the impact. ISO 14030 emphasizes this distinction for effective environmental performance assessment and management. Question 3. When assessing the environmental performance of a manufacturing facility concerning its water discharge quality over a fiscal year, the collected data for a specific pollutant concentration exhibits a consistent, albeit gradual, decrease month over month. Which statistical analytical approach would be most appropriate to rigorously evaluate the significance and rate of this observed environmental improvement according to the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019? Option A. Application of a chi-squared test to assess the distribution of pollutant concentrations across different months. Option B. Calculation of the simple arithmetic mean and standard deviation of all monthly concentrations. Option C. Linear regression analysis to determine the statistical significance and slope of the trend. Option D. Conducting a paired t-test comparing the first and last quarter's average pollutant concentrations. Correct answer is C. Linear regression analysis to determine the statistical significance and slope of the trend. Explanation: the core principle behind ISO 14030, 2019 is to provide a framework for organizations to assess and improve their environmental performance. When analyzing environmental data, particularly for performance indicators, understanding the nature of the data and the appropriate statistical methods is crucial. For data that exhibits a consistent upward or downward trend over time, indicating a directional change in environmental performance, simple averages or standard deviations may not adequately capture the underlying dynamic. Time series analysis techniques are designed to account for temporal dependencies and trends. Specifically, a moving average can smooth out short-term fluctuations, revealing the longer-term trend. However, to formally assess the statistical significance of a trend and its direction, regression analysis is more appropriate. Linear regression, for instance, can model the relationship between time and the environmental indicator, providing a slope coefficient that quantifies the rate of change. A statistically significant slope indicates a discernible trend. Therefore, when faced with data that shows a clear directional movement, applying regression analysis to determine the significance and magnitude of this trend is the most robust statistical approach for performance assessment under ISO 14030. This allows for more informed understanding of whether the organization's environmental initiatives are leading to actual improvements or deteriorations over time, aligning with the standard's focus on performance evaluation. Question 4. Considering the integrated approach to environmental management, how does ISO 14030, 2019, which provides guidelines for the assessment of environmental performance, relate to the foundational requirements of ISO 14001 in terms of establishing and maintaining an environmental management system? Option A. ISO 14030 is a prerequisite for ISO 14001 certification, mandating specific performance targets that must be met before an EMS can be implemented. Option B. ISO 14030 offers a framework for evaluating the effectiveness and progress of an environmental management system established under ISO 14001, thereby supporting its continuous improvement cycle. Option C. ISO 14030 is solely focused on external environmental reporting and has no direct bearing on the internal management of an organization's environmental aspects as defined by ISO 14001. Option D. ISO 14030 replaces the operational control aspects of ISO 14001 by providing a more detailed set of performance indicators for direct implementation. Correct answer is B. ISO 14030 offers a framework for evaluating the effectiveness and progress of an environmental management system established under ISO 14001, thereby supporting its continuous improvement cycle. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations. It is part of the broader ISO 14000 family of standards, which aims to help organizations manage their environmental responsibilities. While ISO 14001 specifies requirements for an environmental management system, EMS, ISO 14030 focuses specifically on the methodologies and principles for evaluating and reporting environmental performance. ISO 14030 is not a certification standard like ISO 14001. Rather, it offers a framework for developing and implementing environmental performance evaluation (EPI) programs. The relationship is one of complementary guidance. ISO 14001 establishes the system for managing environmental aspects and impacts, while ISO 14030 provides the tools and techniques to measure and assess the effectiveness of that system and the organization's overall environmental performance. For instance, an organization certified to ISO 14001 would use the principles outlined in ISO 14030 to conduct internal reviews of its environmental performance, identify areas for improvement, and report progress to stakeholders. This includes selecting appropriate environmental performance indicators, EPI, and establishing methodologies for data collection and analysis, all of which are central to the spirit of continuous improvement inherent in the ISO 14000 series. The standard emphasizes a life cycle perspective and the importance of comparability and reliability in performance data. Question 5. When establishing an environmental performance evaluation (EPI) plan in accordance with ISO 14030, 2019, which initial undertaking is most critical for ensuring the subsequent selection of relevant indicators and the effective assessment of an organization's environmental interactions? Option A. Defining the precise financial budget allocated for the entire environmental management system implementation and ongoing monitoring. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive identification and analysis of the organization's environmental aspects and their associated impacts. Option C. Developing a detailed communication strategy for disseminating EPE results to all external regulatory bodies and governmental agencies. Option D. Establishing a benchmarking framework by comparing the organization's performance against that of its top 3 competitors in the market. The correct answer is B. Conducting a comprehensive identification and analysis of the organization's environmental aspects and their associated impacts. Explanation: the development of an environmental performance evaluation (EPI) plan, as outlined in ISO 14030, 2019, requires a systematic approach to identifying, measuring, analyzing, and communicating an organization's environmental performance. A critical initial step involves defining the scope and boundaries of the EPE system, which dictates which activities, products, services, and sites are included in the assessment. Following this, the organization must establish relevant environmental aspects and their associated impacts, drawing from internal operations and external factors, potentially influenced by regulations like the EU's Emissions Trading System, ETS, or National Environmental Protection Acts. The standard emphasizes the selection of appropriate indicators that are reliable, valid, and comparable over time. For instance, a company assessing its water usage might select total water withdrawn per unit of production as an indicator. The plan must also detail the methodology for data collection, including frequency, sources, and responsibilities, ensuring data integrity. Furthermore, The EPE plan should specify how performance will be analyzed against objectives, targets, and relevant benchmarks, which could include legal requirements or industry best practices. Communication strategies for reporting EPE results to internal and external stakeholders are also a key component. Considering the context of ISO 14030, 2019, the most foundational element for establishing a robust EPE plan is the thorough identification and understanding of the organization's environmental aspects and their potential impacts. Without this, the selection of meaningful indicators and the subsequent measurement and analysis would be misdirected. Therefore, a comprehensive environmental aspect and impact assessment serves as the bedrock upon which the entire EPE plan is built, ensuring that the evaluation focuses on the most significant environmental issues relevant to the organization's operations and its environmental policy. Question 6. In the context of ISO 14030, 2019, consider a chemical manufacturing facility that utilizes a solvent in its production process. This solvent, when released into the atmosphere through ventilation systems, contributes to the formation of ground-level ozone. Which of the following accurately categorizes the solvent release and its contribution to ozone formation, respectively, according to the standard's fundamental definitions? Option A, process parameter, atmospheric alteration. Option B, operational input, environmental outcome. Option C, environmental aspect, environmental impact. Option D, environmental condition, environmental consequence. The correct answer is C, environmental aspect, environmental impact. Explanation. The core of ISO 14030, 2019 lies in establishing a framework for assessing an organization's environmental performance. This involves defining specific environmental aspects and their associated impacts. An environmental aspect is an element of an organization's activities, products, or services that can interact with the environment. An environmental impact is any change to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, wholly or partially resulting from an organization's environmental aspects. The standard emphasizes a systematic approach to identifying, evaluating, and managing these aspects and impacts. For instance, a manufacturing plant's water discharge is an environmental aspect, and the resulting alteration in the receiving water body's quality is an environmental impact. The standard guides organizations to consider the life cycle perspective when identifying aspects and impacts, meaning they should look beyond direct operations to consider inputs and outputs from raw material extraction to product disposal. This holistic view is crucial for a comprehensive environmental performance assessment, aligning with principles of sustainable development and often referencing regulatory frameworks like the EU's REACH, registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals, or National Environmental Protection Acts that mandate reporting on emissions and waste. The distinction between an aspect and an impact is fundamental. The aspect is the cause, and the impact is the effect. Therefore, when an organization monitors its energy consumption, that consumption is the aspect, and the resulting greenhouse gas emissions are the impact. Question 7. A metal fabrication company, Ethelred's Alloys, which manufactures specialized components for the aerospace industry, procures aluminum ingots from a third-party supplier located in a different continent. The supplier's mining and smelting operations for the aluminum are known to have significant impacts on local water resources and air quality, as documented in regional environmental reports. Ethelred's Alloys has implemented stringent internal controls for its own manufacturing processes, including waste reduction and emission control technologies, but has limited direct oversight or control over the supplier's upstream environmental practices. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019, for assessing environmental performance, how should the environmental impact associated with the extraction and smelting of aluminum raw materials by the supplier be primarily classified in relation to Ethelred's Alloys' environmental aspects? Option A, a direct environmental aspect because the aluminum is a primary input to the company's manufacturing process. Option B, an indirect environmental aspect due to the company's lack of direct operational control over the supplier's activities. Option C, a Scope 3 environmental aspect, which is a reporting category distinct from direct or indirect aspects under ISO 14030, 2019. Option D, a potential environmental aspect that is not quantifiable until the aluminum is processed within the company's own facilities. Correct answer is B. An indirect environmental aspect due to the company's lack of direct operational control over the supplier's activities. Explanation: the core of identifying environmental aspects under ISO 14030, 2019 involves a systematic approach to understanding how an organization's activities, products, and services interact with the environment. This standard emphasizes a life cycle perspective, meaning consideration should be given to all stages from raw material acquisition to end-of-life treatment. When evaluating environmental aspects, it's crucial to distinguish between direct and indirect aspects. Direct aspects are those that an organization has direct control over, such as emissions from its own manufacturing processes or waste generated on-site. Indirect aspects, on the other hand, are those that result from the organization's activities, but over which it has limited or no direct control, like the environmental impact of a supplier's raw material extraction or the use phase of a product by a customer. ISO 14030, 2019, like its predecessor ISO 14001, guides organizations to consider significant environmental aspects, which are those that have or can have a significant environmental impact. This determination often involves criteria established by the organization itself, considering factors such as scale, severity, frequency, and regulatory requirements. For instance, a minor spill of a non-hazardous substance might be insignificant, while a large spill of a hazardous substance would be considered significant. The identification process typically involves reviewing operational procedures, material inputs, energy consumption, waste streams, and outputs, as well as considering potential environmental impacts like pollution, resource depletion, and biodiversity loss. The question focuses on a specific scenario to test the understanding of how to categorize an environmental interaction within the framework of ISO 14030, 2019, particularly the distinction between direct and indirect aspects and the consideration of control. The scenario describes a manufacturing company that sources components from external suppliers. The environmental impact of the extraction and processing of raw materials for these components occurs before they are received by the company. Therefore, the company does not have direct control over these upstream activities. While the company influences this through its purchasing decisions, the environmental aspect itself, raw material extraction impact, is not directly managed or controlled by the company's operations. This aligns with the definition of an indirect environmental aspect. Question 8. When an international manufacturing firm, Terraform Global, establishes a new production facility in a developing nation that is a signatory to the Basel Convention and also has recently enacted its own national legislation on hazardous waste management, what is the most comprehensive approach to identifying all applicable environmental laws and regulations for its operations, as per the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019? Option A. Systematically analyzing Terraform Global's entire operational lifecycle, from raw material sourcing to product disposal, mapping each stage to potential environmental impacts, and then cross-referencing these with the host country's environmental statutes, relevant international conventions like the Basel Convention, and any local municipal environmental ordinances. Option B. Relying solely on the environmental impact assessment conducted during the facility's planning phase, assuming it covered all pertinent legal requirements, and then only monitoring for amendments to those specific regulations identified. Option C. Prioritizing compliance with the environmental laws of Terraform Global's home country, assuming they are more stringent, and applying those standards to the new facility, while only addressing host country laws that are explicitly contradictory or less stringent. Option D. Primarily focusing on the national hazardous waste legislation of the host country and any overarching international environmental treaties the nation has ratified, while disregarding other environmental statutes unless directly related to waste. The correct answer is D. Primarily focusing on the national hazardous waste legislation of the host country and any overarching international environmental treaties the nation has ratified, while disregarding other environmental statutes unless directly related to waste. Explanation: the core principle of identifying applicable environmental laws and regulations for an organization, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, involves a systematic approach that goes beyond simply listing national statutes. It necessitates understanding the organization's specific activities, products, services, and their potential environmental interactions. This includes considering the geographical location of operations, as local and regional regulations can significantly differ and impose additional requirements. Furthermore, the scope of the organization's environmental aspects, as defined in its environmental management system, is crucial. For instance, an organization involved in chemical manufacturing will have a different set of applicable laws than one primarily engaged in software development, even if both operate within the same country. The guidelines emphasize a proactive stance, requiring the organization to not only identify current legal obligations, but also anticipate potential future regulatory changes that might impact its operations or environmental performance objectives. This involves monitoring legislative developments, engaging with industry bodies, and consulting with legal experts. The process should also encompass international agreements or conventions if the organization has cross-border operations or imports/exports regulated materials. Therefore, a comprehensive identification process integrates internal operational knowledge with external regulatory intelligence. Question 9. A manufacturing firm, TerraCycle Industries, has identified significant energy consumption from its primary production line as a key environmental aspect. Their environmental policy commits to continuous improvement in energy efficiency. Following the guidelines of ISO 14030, 2019, TerraCycle aims to establish a quantifiable target to address this aspect. They have analyzed their current energy usage per unit of output, which stands at 1.2 kWh/unit. They have also reviewed available energy-saving technologies and conducted an internal feasibility study. Considering their operational constraints and the potential for improvement, which of the following represents the most appropriate environmental target that aligns with the principles of ISO 14030, 2019 for establishing objectives and targets? Option A. Significantly decrease overall energy consumption by the end of the next fiscal year. Option B. Achieve a 10% reduction in energy consumption per unit of output within 18 months, bringing the usage down to 1.08 kWh/unit. Option C. Reduce the energy intensity of the production process to below 1.0 kWh/unit as soon as technologically feasible. Option D. Implement at least 2 new energy-saving initiatives on the production line without specifying a quantitative reduction. The correct answer is B. Achieve a 10% reduction in energy consumption per unit of output within 18 months, bringing the usage down to 1.08 kWh/unit. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. Establishing environmental objectives and targets is a crucial step in this process, requiring a systematic approach that considers the organization's environmental policy, significant environmental aspects, legal and other requirements, and the views of interested parties. Objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART. Targets are quantifiable measures that an organization sets to achieve its objectives. When setting targets, an organization must consider its operational capabilities, available resources, and the feasibility of achieving the desired improvements within the specified timeframe. For instance, if an organization identifies reducing water consumption as a significant environmental aspect and sets an objective to minimize water usage in manufacturing processes, a corresponding target might be to reduce per-unit water consumption by 15% within 2 fiscal years. This target is specific: water consumption per unit, measurable, 15% reduction, achievable, assuming operational analysis supports it, relevant, directly linked to the objective, and time-bound, 2 fiscal years. The process also involves integrating these objectives and targets into the organization's environmental management system and operational plans, ensuring that responsibilities are assigned and resources are allocated. Furthermore, ISO 14030 emphasizes the need for regular review and revision of objectives and targets to ensure their continued relevance and effectiveness in driving environmental performance improvement, particularly in light of changing regulations, technological advancements, and stakeholder expectations. Question 10. Consider a global manufacturing firm, TerraCycle Industries, aiming to enhance its environmental reporting in alignment with ISO 14030, 2019. They are evaluating potential environmental performance indicators (EPI) to track their progress in reducing volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions from their painting processes. Which set of criteria would best ensure the selected EPI for VOC emissions is robust and useful for TerraCycle Industries? Option A. The EPI should reflect the number of quality control checks performed on paint batches, be expressible as a simple percentage of waste material, be subjective to operator observation, and be easily presented in monthly newsletters. Option B. The EPI should be linked to the company's stock price, be measured by the number of environmental awards received, be easily adaptable to different reporting frameworks without recalculation, and be primarily focused on public relations impact. Option C. The EPI should be based on the geographical location of their facilities, be calculable from employee training records, exhibit variability based on seasonal weather patterns, and require specialized external consultants for data interpretation. Option D. The EPI should directly correlate with the total volume of paint used, be quantifiable through regular air quality monitoring, demonstrate consistent readings over repeated measurements, and enable comparison with national emission standards. The correct answer is D. The EPI should directly correlate with the total volume of paint used, be quantifiable through regular air quality monitoring, demonstrate consistent readings over repeated measurements, and enable comparison with national emission standards. Explanation: the selection of environmental performance indicators, EPI, for an organization's environmental management system, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, hinges on several critical criteria to ensure their effectiveness in measuring and managing environmental performance. These criteria are not arbitrary, but are designed to yield meaningful insights and support informed decision-making. Relevance is paramount. An EPI must directly relate to the organization's significant environmental aspects and impacts, as identified through its environmental review and operational controls. Measurability is equally crucial, meaning the data required to calculate the EPI must be obtainable, quantifiable, and verifiable through reliable data collection processes. This ensures that performance can be tracked objectively over time. Reliability or consistency is vital, implying that the EPI should produce similar results when applied under similar conditions, free from significant random fluctuations or biases. Furthermore, comparability allows for benchmarking against past performance, industry peers, or regulatory targets, which is essential for evaluating progress and identifying areas for improvement. Understandability and accessibility of the EPI and its underlying data to relevant stakeholders, including management and operational staff, are also important for fostering engagement and accountability. The chosen EPI should also be actionable, meaning that changes in its value can be linked to specific management decisions or operational changes, enabling the organization to influence its environmental performance. Finally, the cost-effectiveness of collecting and reporting the data for the EPI should be considered, balancing the benefits of the information gained against the resources expended. Question 11. Consider a manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, aiming to conduct an environmental performance assessment as per ISO 14030, 2019. During the initial planning phase, the environmental management team proposes an objective solely focused on generating a publicly available report detailing the company's greenhouse gas emissions for the past fiscal year, without explicitly linking this to internal operational improvements or compliance with specific national emission standards. Which of the following best describes the deficiency in this proposed objective from the perspective of ISO 14030, 2019 planning guidelines? Option A. It lacks integration with the organization's broader environmental policy and strategic goals, and does not sufficiently address the need for actionable insights for internal improvement or regulatory context. Option B. It focuses too narrowly on a single environmental aspect, GHG emissions, and neglects other significant environmental impacts. Option C. It fails to include quantitative targets for emission reduction, making the assessment unmeasurable. Option D. It overlooks the importance of stakeholder engagement in defining the assessment's scope and objectives. The correct answer is A. It lacks integration with the organization's broader environmental policy and strategic goals, and does not sufficiently address the need for actionable insights for internal improvement or regulatory context. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides a framework for organizations to assess their environmental performance. A crucial element in this process is the planning phase, which involves defining the scope and objectives of the assessment. When establishing objectives for an environmental performance assessment, it is essential to ensure they are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART. However, the standard also emphasizes the importance of aligning these objectives with the organization's overall environmental policy and strategic goals. Furthermore, the planning stage requires consideration of the intended users of the assessment results, such as management, regulators, or stakeholders, as this influences the level of detail and the types of performance indicators chosen. The selection of relevant environmental aspects and their associated impacts, informed by legislation and the organization's activities, is also a critical planning consideration. This ensures that the assessment focuses on the most significant environmental issues. The standard advocates for a systematic approach, integrating the assessment planning with the organization's existing environmental management system. The ultimate aim is to generate reliable and actionable information that supports continuous improvement in environmental performance. Therefore, an objective that is solely focused on external reporting without internal improvement mechanisms or consideration of regulatory compliance would be incomplete according to the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019. Question 12. An industrial manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is preparing its annual environmental performance report in accordance with ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines. They have identified significant environmental aspects including energy consumption, water usage, and solid waste generation. To enhance the report's credibility and utility for stakeholders such as investors and regulatory bodies, which of the following approaches would best align with the principles of ISO 14030, 2019 for developing their environmental performance indicators and reporting content? Option A. Selecting a broad range of general environmental metrics that are commonly reported across industries, irrespective of their direct relevance to Veridian Dynamics' specific significant environmental aspects or objectives, and omitting any discussion of data limitations. Option B. Prioritizing indicators that demonstrate the most favorable trends, even if they represent minor environmental aspects, and presenting data without external verification to maintain reporting flexibility. Option C. Emphasizing qualitative descriptions of environmental initiatives without quantifying performance through specific indicators, and limiting the report's scope to internal operational data only, excluding any external benchmarks or regulatory compliance information. Option D. Focusing on indicators directly linked to Veridian Dynamics' identified significant environmental aspects and stated environmental objectives, ensuring data is collected consistently, and incorporating a third-party verification process for key performance data. Correct answer is B. Prioritizing indicators that demonstrate the most favorable trends, even if they represent minor environmental aspects, and presenting data without external verification to maintain reporting flexibility. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019, Environmental Management Guidelines for the Assessment of Environmental Performance of Organizations, emphasizes the importance of clear, credible, and relevant environmental performance reporting. When developing such reports, organizations must consider various factors to ensure their utility and trustworthiness. A key aspect is the selection of performance indicators, KPI. These KPIs should be directly linked to the organization's significant environmental aspects, as identified through its environmental management system, and should reflect progress towards its environmental objectives and targets. The reporting framework should also consider the intended audience and their information needs, ensuring that the data presented is understandable and actionable. Furthermore, the reporting process should incorporate mechanisms for data validation and verification to enhance credibility. The guidelines suggest a structured approach to reporting, which includes defining the scope of the report, identifying relevant stakeholders, selecting appropriate indicators, collecting and analyzing data, and presenting the findings in a transparent manner. The reporting should also align with relevant national or international reporting frameworks where applicable, such as those related to climate change disclosures or waste management statistics, ensuring comparability and consistency. The ultimate goal is to provide stakeholders with a comprehensive and accurate picture of the organization's environmental performance, facilitating informed decision-making and driving continuous improvement. Question 13. A chemical manufacturing firm, Aquachem Solutions, has been under intense public scrutiny following reports of elevated levels of specific pollutants in its wastewater discharge, which have led to local environmental agency investigations under regulations similar to the Clean Water Act. To rebuild public trust and demonstrate its commitment to environmental stewardship, Aquachem Solutions plans to communicate its environmental performance to its diverse stakeholder groups, including local communities, regulatory bodies, and investors. Which of the following communication strategies would best align with the principles of ISO 14030, 2019 for assessing and communicating environmental performance, given the company's recent challenges? Option A. Publish a detailed report featuring verified environmental performance indicators, including specific wastewater quality data and compliance status with relevant discharge permits, supported by independent third-party assurance. Option B. Issue a press release broadly stating the company's commitment to environmental excellence and outlining future goals for pollution reduction, without providing specific current performance metrics or verification. Option C. Focus communication on the economic benefits of the company's operations to the local community, downplaying the environmental performance aspects due to the ongoing investigations. Option D. Share an internal audit report that highlights the company's environmental management system processes, but omits specific performance data and third-party verification. The correct answer is A. Publish a detailed report featuring verified environmental performance indicators, including specific wastewater quality data and compliance status with relevant discharge permits, supported by independent third-party assurance. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides a framework for organizations to assess and communicate their environmental performance. A key aspect of this standard is ensuring that the communication is transparent, credible, and relevant to the intended audience. When communicating environmental performance to stakeholders, particularly in the context of regulatory compliance and public perception, an organization must consider the level of detail, the types of indicators used, and the assurance mechanisms in place. The standard emphasizes the importance of aligning communication with the organization's environmental policy and objectives. Furthermore, it suggests that communication should be proactive and address potential concerns or questions from stakeholders. Considering the specific scenario of a chemical manufacturing company that has recently faced public scrutiny regarding its wastewater discharge, the most effective communication strategy would involve presenting a comprehensive report that details specific environmental performance indicators, such as effluent quality parameters and compliance with local discharge permits, like those issued under the Clean Water Act in the United States. This report should also include third-party verification of the data to enhance credibility. Such an approach directly addresses stakeholder concerns by providing concrete evidence of environmental management practices and compliance, fostering trust and demonstrating accountability. Simply stating a general commitment to environmental improvement or focusing only on future targets without current performance data would be insufficient given the existing public concern. Question 14. Consider the scenario where a manufacturing facility, operating under a framework guided by ISO 14030, 2019, discovers that its wastewater discharge consistently exceeds the permitted levels for suspended solids, as reported by an independent regulatory audit. The facility's environmental management team has traced the root cause to a malfunctioning filtration unit and a lack of rigorous daily operational checks for this specific equipment. According to the principles of implementing corrective and preventive actions within an environmental management system, aligned with ISO 14030, 2019, which of the following sequences of actions would most effectively address both the immediate issue and potential future occurrences? Option A. Repair the malfunctioning filtration unit, implement a mandatory daily checklist for its operation and maintenance, and conduct a review of all critical filtration systems across the facility to identify any similar potential vulnerabilities. Option B. Increase the frequency of wastewater sampling downstream from the filtration unit to ensure compliance is being met through enhanced monitoring, and document the incident in the company's historical environmental records. Option C. Immediately cease all operations until the filtration unit is fully replaced with a superior model, and issue a formal apology to the local environmental agency. Option D. Focus solely on retraining the operational staff responsible for the filtration unit to prevent future human error, without altering the existing equipment or procedures. The correct answer is A. Repair the malfunctioning filtration unit, implement a mandatory daily checklist for its operation and maintenance, and conduct a review of all critical filtration systems across the facility to identify any similar potential vulnerabilities. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019, in its guidelines for assessing environmental performance, emphasizes the iterative nature of environmental management systems. When a nonconformity is identified, such as exceeding a discharge limit for a specific pollutant, the organization must implement corrective actions to address the immediate cause and prevent recurrence. Preventive actions, on the other hand, are proactive measures taken to eliminate the causes of potential nonconformities. The standard promotes a systematic approach to identifying root causes, developing effective solutions, and verifying their implementation. This involves not only fixing the immediate problem, but also understanding the underlying systemic issues that allowed the nonconformity to occur. For instance, if a chemical spill occurs due to inadequate training, the corrective action would be to retrain personnel. However, a preventive action might involve revising the chemical handling procedures, upgrading storage facilities, or implementing a more robust inventory management system to prevent future spills. Even if the initial incident was isolated, the effectiveness of these actions is then monitored and reviewed as part of the continuous improvement cycle mandated by environmental management principles. This proactive stance aligns with the overall objective of enhancing environmental performance and mitigating risks. Question 15. Consider an industrial facility in the European Union that manufactures specialized chemicals and is subject to the Industrial Emissions Directive, WIDE. The facility is implementing ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines to assess its environmental performance, specifically focusing on air emissions monitoring. The facility uses a continuous emissions monitoring system, SEMS, to measure sulfur dioxide SO2 concentrations at its main stack. To ensure the reliability of this data for reporting under both ISO 14030, 2019, and the IED, what is the most critical element of their measurement equipment management program for this SEMS? Option A. The procurement of SEMS equipment solely based on the lowest initial purchase price to minimize capital expenditure. Option B. Reliance on the manufacturer's default maintenance recommendations without establishing an independent, site-specific schedule and verification process. Option C. Periodic internal audits of the SEMS software to verify data processing algorithms and ensure compliance with internal company policies. Option D. A comprehensive, documented calibration and maintenance schedule with detailed records of all activities, traceable to national or international standards. The correct answer is D. A comprehensive, documented calibration and maintenance schedule with detailed records of all activities, traceable to national or international standards. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14030, 2019 regarding measurement equipment for environmental performance assessment emphasizes the need for reliability and traceability. This involves establishing a systematic process for ensuring that the instruments used to gather data are accurate and that their readings can be linked to recognized standards. A key component of this is the development and adherence to a documented calibration and maintenance schedule. This schedule dictates the frequency of calibrations, the procedures to be followed, the criteria for acceptance, and the actions to be taken if an instrument fails to meet these criteria. Furthermore, it necessitates maintaining detailed records of all calibration and maintenance activities, including dates, results, personnel involved, and any adjustments made. This documentation is crucial for demonstrating compliance, supporting the validity of the environmental performance data, and facilitating continuous improvement of the measurement system. Without a robust and documented schedule, the integrity of the collected data is compromised, potentially leading to flawed assessments and ineffective environmental management decisions. This aligns with the broader requirements for competence and data quality outlined within environmental management standards. Question 16. A multinational manufacturing firm, operating across several jurisdictions with varying environmental regulations, is undergoing an assessment of its environmental performance as per ISO 14030-2019. The firm has a history of minor infractions related to wastewater discharge limits in one country, which have been rectified. However, the assessment team has identified that the firm has not systematically tracked or anticipated upcoming legislative changes in a key market concerning the phase-out of certain persistent organic pollutants, POP, used in its legacy product lines. Which aspect of legal compliance assessment, as guided by ISO 14030-2019, is the firm most deficient in, impacting its overall environmental performance evaluation? Option A. The extent of internal audits conducted solely on current operational permits and licenses. Option B. Proactive identification and integration of potential future environmental regulatory requirements into performance metrics and operational planning. Option C. The mere record of past compliance with established national environmental protection acts and permits. Option D. The number of environmental impact assessments completed for new projects initiated within the last fiscal year. Correct answer is B. Proactive identification and integration of potential future environmental regulatory requirements into performance metrics and operational planning. Explanation: ISO 14030-2019 Guidelines for the Assessment of Environmental Performance of Organizations emphasizes the integration of legal compliance into an organization's environmental management system. When assessing an organization's environmental performance, particularly concerning legal obligations, it is crucial to consider not only adherence to current statutes, but also the proactive identification and management of emerging regulatory landscapes. This includes anticipating future environmental legislation, such as potential carbon pricing mechanisms or stricter waste management directives, and evaluating their potential impact on the organization's operations and performance metrics. An effective assessment would involve mapping existing operational activities against current environmental laws and regulations relevant to the specific industry and geographical location, such as the Clean Air Act in the United States or the EU emissions trading system. Furthermore, it requires a robust system for monitoring changes in legislation and updating internal policies and procedures accordingly. The assessment should also consider the organization's historical compliance record, any enforcement actions taken against it, and the effectiveness of its internal controls for ensuring ongoing compliance. This holistic approach ensures that the environmental performance assessment provides a true reflection of the organization's commitment to environmental stewardship and its preparedness for future regulatory challenges, thereby aligning with the principles of continuous improvement inherent in environmental management frameworks. Question 17. A manufacturing firm, Ethelred Industries, operating under stringent European Union environmental directives concerning industrial emissions and waste management, is preparing its annual environmental performance report. They have meticulously collected data on energy consumption, water usage, waste generation, and greenhouse gas emissions. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14030-2019, which of the following reporting strategies would best demonstrate a commitment to comprehensive environmental performance assessment and stakeholder engagement, while also ensuring the report's credibility and relevance? Option A. Presenting aggregated data for key performance indicators alongside a detailed qualitative analysis of the underlying causes for performance changes and future improvement strategies, supported by third-party verification of the reported data. Option B. Including a broad range of environmental data without specific context or targets, relying on the sheer volume of information to convey a strong environmental commitment. Option C. Providing a selective overview of positive environmental achievements, omitting any data that might reflect areas needing significant improvement or challenges encountered. Option D. Focusing solely on quantitative data for legally mandated environmental parameters, with minimal narrative explanation, assuming stakeholders are primarily interested in regulatory compliance. The correct answer is A. Presenting aggregated data for key performance indicators alongside a detailed qualitative analysis of the underlying causes for performance changes and future improvement strategies, supported by third-party verification of the reported data. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides guidelines for assessing and reporting an organization's environmental performance. The standard emphasizes the importance of establishing a framework for collecting, analyzing, and communicating environmental data. When reporting, organizations must consider the needs of various stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, investors, and the public. The selection of reporting indicators is crucial and should align with the organization's environmental policy, objectives, and significant environmental aspects. Transparency and comparability are key principles. ISO 14030, 2019 suggests that reporting should go beyond mere compliance with environmental regulations, such as the European Union's Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, or National Waste Management Directives, and should reflect a proactive approach to environmental stewardship. The credibility of the reported information is enhanced through verification by an independent third party. The reporting process should also consider the life cycle perspective of products and services, identifying opportunities for improvement across the value chain. The standard encourages the use of internationally recognized reporting frameworks where appropriate, ensuring consistency and facilitating benchmarking. The ultimate goal is to provide a clear and accurate picture of the organization's environmental impact and its efforts to manage and improve its environmental performance over time. Question 18. Consider an industrial facility that has identified its significant environmental aspects, including substantial water discharge and volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions, as per the initial planning stage of its environmental management system aligned with ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines. During the subsequent due phase, the facility implemented new wastewater treatment procedures and installed advanced VOC abatement technology. In the check phase, internal monitoring revealed that while wastewater discharge parameters were within the newly established targets, VOC emissions, although reduced, still exceeded the legally mandated limits set by the National Environmental Protection Agency. Which action in the ACT phase would most effectively address this specific performance gap and support the continuous improvement mandated by ISO 14030, 2019? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entire environmental management system, including aspects unrelated to emissions, to identify potential systemic failures. Option B. Revise the operational procedures for the VOC abatement technology, retrain relevant personnel on its correct functioning, and reevaluate the monitoring frequency of VOC emissions in the next plan phase. Option C. Focus solely on increasing the capacity of the wastewater treatment system to compensate for the VOC emission shortfall, assuming a correlation between the two. Option D. Cease all production activities until the VOC emission levels are definitively resolved, without further analysis or corrective action planning. The correct answer is B. Revise the operational procedures for the VOC abatement technology, retrain relevant personnel on its correct functioning, and reevaluate the monitoring frequency of VOC emissions in the next plan phase. Explanation: the Plan Do Check Act, PDCA cycle, also known as the deeming cycle, is a fundamental iterative four-step management method used for the control and continuous improvement of processes and products. In the context of ISO 14030, 2019, which provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, the PDCA cycle is crucial for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an environmental management system, EMS. The plan phase involves identifying environmental aspects, setting objectives and targets, and developing programs to achieve them, considering relevant legal requirements and other obligations. The do phase is the implementation of these plans, including training, operational controls, and emergency preparedness. The check phase involves monitoring and measuring environmental performance against objectives and targets, evaluating compliance with legal and other requirements, and conducting internal audits. Finally, ACT phase focuses on taking actions to continually improve the EMS and environmental performance based on the results of the check phase, which might include correcting nonconformities, addressing root causes, and updating objectives and targets. For an organization aiming to improve its environmental performance, a thorough review of its waste generation data and energy consumption metrics during the check phase would inform corrective actions in the ACT phase. These actions might involve implementing new waste segregation protocols or investing in more energy-efficient machinery. Subsequently, the updated waste management plan and energy efficiency targets would be re-established in the plan phase for the next cycle. This iterative process ensures that the organization's environmental management system remains effective and responsive to changing conditions and performance data, aligning with the principles of continuous improvement inherent in ISO 14030-2019. Question 19. A global electronics manufacturer, Innovate Tech, is undergoing a comprehensive review of its environmental management system in accordance with ISO 14030-2019 guidelines. Innovate Tech operates multiple production facilities worldwide, each with varying regulatory landscapes and operational complexities. The primary strategic objective is to demonstrably improve resource efficiency and minimize waste generation across all sites. Considering the need for robust, actionable, and comparable environmental performance indicators, EPI, that reflect actual operational efficiency and environmental impact, which of the following approaches to selecting EPIs would be most aligned with the principles of ISO 14030-2019 for Innovate Tech's stated objectives? Option A. Prioritize EPIs that quantify the ratio of non-recycled waste generated to the total mass of raw materials processed, segmented by product line and facility, to identify specific areas for waste reduction and material efficiency improvements. Option B. Select EPIs that focus on the absolute reduction of greenhouse gas emissions per facility, irrespective of production volume changes, to demonstrate a clear commitment to climate action. Option C. Adopt EPIs that measure compliance with local environmental permits and licenses, ensuring that all operational activities remain within legal boundaries. Option D. Choose EPIs that reflect the total amount of water consumed per year across all operations, without specific allocation to production processes or water recycling initiatives. The correct answer is A. Prioritize EPIs that quantify the ratio of non-recycled waste generated to the total mass of raw materials processed, segmented by product line and facility, to identify specific areas for waste reduction and material efficiency improvements. Explanation: the selection of environmental performance indicators, EPI, for an organization under ISO 14030-2019 is a critical step that requires a systematic approach. The standard emphasizes that EPIs should be relevant to the organization's environmental aspects, objectives, and the context of its operations. When evaluating potential EPIs, an organization must consider their measurability, reliability, comparability, and the ability of the indicator to reflect significant environmental performance changes. For a manufacturing firm aiming to reduce its overall environmental footprint, particularly in relation to resource consumption and waste generation, an EPI that directly links input materials to output products, while also accounting for waste streams, would be most effective. This type of indicator provides insight into material efficiency and the effectiveness of waste reduction strategies. For instance, an indicator that measures the total mass of waste generated per unit of finished product, considering both hazardous and non-hazardous waste, offers a direct assessment of waste management performance. Furthermore, this indicator can be broken down to analyze specific waste streams, aiding in the identification of targeted improvement areas. The relevance of such an indicator is heightened when contrasted with broader, less specific metrics. For example, a general measure of total energy consumed without a link to production output would be less informative about the efficiency of the manufacturing process itself. Similarly, an indicator solely focused on compliance with specific regulations, while important, might not capture the full spectrum of performance improvement opportunities. The chosen EPI must also allow for trend analysis over time, and where appropriate, comparison with industry benchmarks, enabling a comprehensive understanding of performance evolution and competitive positioning. Question 20. A manufacturing firm operating under stringent regional air quality regulations that limit particulate matter emissions is seeking to enhance its environmental management system in line with ISO 14030-2019 guidelines. The company's production processes involve several stages that generate dust, To effectively address this, what fundamental principle should guide the design of their employee environmental training program concerning particulate matter control? Option A. Conducting generic environmental awareness sessions for all staff, covering broad environmental topics without delving into specific operational controls for particulate matter. Option B. Implementing training that emphasizes the use of personal protective equipment for dust exposure, irrespective of the employee's role in the actual emission process. Option C. Tailoring training content to specific job functions and their direct impact on particulate matter generation and control, ensuring alignment with the company's environmental policy and relevant emission standards. Option D. Focusing solely on the theoretical aspects of air pollution science and the legal penalties for non-compliance, without practical application to the firm's processes. The correct answer is C. Tailoring training content to specific job functions and their direct impact on particulate matter generation and control, ensuring alignment with the company's environmental policy and relevant emission standards. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019, which provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, emphasizes the importance of competence, including training, for personnel involved in environmental management. When developing an environmental training program for employees, the focus should be on ensuring that the training directly contributes to the organization's environmental objectives and legal compliance. This involves identifying specific environmental aspects relevant to the employee's roles, understanding the potential environmental impacts associated with those aspects, and imparting knowledge and skills to mitigate these impacts. Furthermore, the training must align with applicable environmental legislation and standards, such as the principles of the European Union's Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, or national regulations concerning waste management and pollution control, ensuring employees understand their responsibilities in maintaining compliance. The effectiveness of the training is then evaluated by observing changes in employee behavior and their contribution to achieving environmental performance targets. Therefore, the most effective approach to environmental training, as per the spirit of ISO 14030, 2019, is one that is tailored to the organization's specific environmental policy, operational context, and legal obligations, fostering a culture of continuous improvement in environmental performance. Question 21. Consider an industrial manufacturing firm that has consistently failed to meet its annual water usage reduction targets for the past 3 fiscal years, as stipulated by its internal environmental policy aligned with ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines. During the post-year-end performance review, it was noted that while water monitoring data was collected, the analysis of this data did not identify specific process inefficiencies leading to the overconsumption. Which of the following actions would be the most appropriate next step for the firm to take in accordance with the principles of reviewing and improving environmental performance as outlined in ISO 14030, 2019? Option A. Implement enhanced water usage monitoring protocols and conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the identified deviations to pinpoint specific operational factors contributing to the failure to meet targets. Option B. Conduct an external audit of the environmental management system to identify systemic weaknesses without focusing on specific operational data analysis for the current year. Option C. Increase employee awareness campaigns regarding water conservation without altering current operational procedures or data analysis methodologies. Option D. Revise the environmental policy to set more achievable water usage reduction targets for the upcoming fiscal year, reflecting the current operational realities. Correct answer is A. Implement enhanced water usage monitoring protocols and conduct a detailed root cause analysis of the identified deviations to pinpoint specific operational factors contributing to the failure to meet targets. Explanation: the core of reviewing and improving environmental performance under ISO 14030, 2019 involves a cyclical process of monitoring, evaluation, and corrective action. When an organization identifies a discrepancy between its actual environmental performance and its set objectives or targets, it must initiate a systematic review. This review should not only pinpoint the root cause of the deviation, but also assess the effectiveness of existing environmental management system, EMS, elements that may have contributed to the issue. For instance, if energy consumption targets are consistently missed. The review would examine energy monitoring procedures, operational controls for energy-intensive processes, and employee training on energy-saving practices. Following the identification of root causes, the organization must then determine and implement appropriate corrective actions. These actions are designed to prevent recurrence of the nonconformity. Crucially, ISO 14030 2019 emphasizes that the effectiveness of these implemented corrective actions must be verified. This verification step is vital for ensuring that the changes made have indeed led to the desired improvement in environmental performance, and that the system is functioning as intended. This iterative process of review, action, and verification forms the backbone of continuous improvement in environmental management. The framework encourages proactive identification of potential issues and the systematic implementation of solutions, ensuring that the organization's environmental performance is not only monitored but actively enhanced over time, aligning with broader environmental regulations and societal expectations. Question 22. Consider a manufacturing firm, Ethelred Industries, which produces specialized ceramic components. Ethelred Industries sources its primary clay from a mine located 500 kilometers away, transported by road using a third-party logistics provider. The manufacturing process involves high-temperature kilns, water-intensive cleaning of components, and the generation of ceramic dust and wastewater. Post-production. The components are shipped to clients globally via sea freight. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019, for assessing environmental performance, which of the following best represents the most comprehensive approach to identifying Ethelred Industries' environmental aspects, encompassing both direct and indirect interactions with the environment? Option A. Systematically cataloging all inputs, raw materials, energy, water, and outputs, emissions, waste products of the manufacturing facility, and then extending this analysis to the upstream mining and raw material extraction, and downstream product use and disposal phases, including indirect supply chain activities. Option B. Focusing solely on the emissions from the kilns, wastewater discharge from cleaning, and solid waste from rejected components, as these are directly managed by the company. Option C. Prioritizing the identification of aspects related to regulatory compliance, such as air emission permits and wastewater discharge limits, and then addressing other operational aspects as resources allow. Option D. Primarily evaluating the energy consumption of the kilns and the volume of wastewater generated, while acknowledging the transportation of raw materials and finished goods as secondary considerations. Correct answer is B. Focusing solely on the emissions from the kilns, wastewater discharge from cleaning, and solid waste from rejected components, as these are directly managed by the company. Explanation. The identification of environmental aspects and their associated impacts is a foundational step in assessing an organization's environmental performance, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019. Environmental aspects are elements of an organization's activities, products, or services that can interact with the environment. Environmental impacts are any changes to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, wholly or partially resulting from an organization's environmental aspects. ISO 14030 emphasizes a systematic approach to this identification, considering both normal operating conditions, abnormal conditions, and emergency situations. The standard advocates for a comprehensive review that includes direct and indirect aspects. Direct aspects are those that the organization has direct control over, such as emissions from its own processes. Indirect aspects are those that result from the organization's activities, but over which it has limited or no direct control, such as the environmental impact of a product after its sale or the transportation of raw materials by a third-party supplier. When determining the significance of an environmental impact, organizations should consider criteria such as the severity, extent, duration, reversibility, and regulatory compliance status. For instance, a minor emission that persists for a long duration and is in violation of local air quality regulations might be deemed more significant than a larger, short-term emission that is within permitted limits. Furthermore, the guideline suggests considering the potential for cumulative impacts and the context of the local and regional environment. The process should involve input from various stakeholders and departments within the organization to ensure a thorough and accurate assessment. A key principle is to move beyond merely identifying obvious aspects like waste generation and to delve into less apparent interactions, such as the embodied energy in purchased materials or the impact of water usage on local ecosystems. Question 23. An organization notes a consistent decline in water consumption per unit of output over the past 3 fiscal years. Simultaneously, their energy consumption per unit of output has seen a marginal increase, and their hazardous waste generation per unit of output has also shown a slight upward trend. Considering the principles of ISO 14030, 2019 for assessing environmental performance, which interpretation of these combined trends most accurately reflects a need for deeper investigation into the interconnectedness of environmental aspects. Option A. The upward trend in energy consumption and hazardous waste generation suggests a fundamental flaw in the organization's production processes, necessitating an immediate overhaul of all operational procedures, irrespective of the water consumption improvements. Option B. The observed reduction in water usage is a positive indicator, but the concurrent rise in energy consumption and hazardous waste generation warrants a detailed review to ensure that the water-saving measures are not creating compensatory negative impacts elsewhere in the operational life cycle. Option C. The primary goal of environmental performance assessment is to reduce resource consumption, and the significant decrease in water usage effectively outweighs the minor increases in energy and waste, indicating overall positive progress. Option D. The observed trends are typical for a maturing industrial process, where initial resource efficiency gains are often accompanied by minor increases in other environmental impact categories, and no further analysis is immediately required beyond standard reporting. The correct answer is B. The observed reduction in water usage is a positive indicator, but the concurrent rise in energy consumption and hazardous waste generation warrants a detailed review to ensure that the water-saving measures are not creating compensatory negative impacts elsewhere in the operational life cycle. Explanation. The core principle of trend analysis in environmental performance assessment, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, is to identify patterns and shifts over time to inform strategic decision-making and evaluate the effectiveness of environmental management initiatives. When assessing a significant decrease in water consumption per unit of production, it is crucial to look beyond the immediate reduction and consider the underlying causes and broader implications. A decrease in water consumption might be a direct result of implementing water-efficient technologies, process optimization, or even a shift in the product mix towards less water-intensive goods. However, a superficial interpretation could overlook other critical factors. For instance, a concurrent rise in energy consumption for the same production output might indicate that water-saving measures are being achieved through energy-intensive processes, potentially offsetting the environmental benefits or creating new challenges. Similarly, an increase in waste generation per unit of production could suggest that water conservation efforts are leading to the discharge of more concentrated pollutants, requiring more intensive waste treatment. Therefore, a comprehensive trend analysis requires examining multiple environmental indicators in conjunction with each other and with production metrics. This holistic approach allows for the identification of interdependencies and unintended consequences, ensuring that improvements in one area do not lead to significant degradation in others, and that the overall environmental performance is genuinely enhanced in alignment with the principles of sustainable development and the intent of ISO 14030, 2019. It is about understanding the systemic impacts, not just isolated improvements. Question 24. An industrial manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is committed to enhancing its environmental stewardship in line with ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines. Their environmental management team is tasked with formulating a new environmental performance indicator, EPI, to monitor and improve their energy efficiency related to manufacturing processes. They have identified that a significant portion of their energy consumption stems from outdated machinery and inefficient operational protocols. Which of the following EPIs, when developed according to the SMART criteria, will most effectively guide Veridian Dynamics in achieving demonstrable progress in energy efficiency within their operational context? Option A. Invest in renewable energy sources to offset energy usage. Option B. Improve energy efficiency in manufacturing operations. Option C. Reduce overall energy consumption across all facilities by 20% in the next 5 years. Option D. Decrease the energy consumed per unit of finished product by 10% from the 2023 average by the end of 2026. The correct answer is D. Decrease the energy consumed per unit of finished product by 10% from the 2023 average by the end of 2026. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides a framework for assessing the environmental performance of organizations through environmental performance indicators. EPI. Developing effective EPIs is crucial for meaningful evaluation and continuous improvement. The SMART criteria, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, are fundamental to constructing robust EPIs. A specific EPI clearly defines what is being measured. Measurable implies that the EPI can be quantified or assessed objectively. Achievable means the target or performance level is realistic given the organization's capabilities and context. Relevant signifies that the EPI directly relates to the organization's significant environmental aspects and strategic objectives, as identified through its environmental management system. Time-bound establishes a clear time frame for achieving the stated performance level or for the period of measurement. Consider an organization aiming to reduce its water consumption. An EPI such as reduce total annual water withdrawal by 15% compared to the 2023 baseline, achieving this reduction by the end of fiscal year 2025, exemplifies the SMART criteria. It is specific by identifying the metric total annual water withdrawal and the target percentage, 15%. It is measurable through the comparison to a defined baseline and the tracking of annual withdrawal. It is achievable if the organization has identified feasible reduction strategies. It is relevant as water consumption is likely a significant environmental aspect. Finally, it is time-bound with the clear deadline of the end of fiscal year 2025. An EPI that is not time-bound, for example, reduce water withdrawal, lacks the temporal dimension necessary for effective performance management and progress tracking, making it difficult to gauge success and implement corrective actions within a defined period. Question 25. When performing an internal audit of an organization's environmental performance assessment process, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, what is the primary focus for ensuring the validity and reliability of the collected environmental data used for performance evaluation? Option A. Verification that the data collection methodologies align with the specific environmental indicators and are consistently applied across all relevant operational units. Option B. Confirmation that the audit team possesses a broad understanding of all applicable environmental regulations without a specific focus on data integrity. Option C. Review of historical environmental reports to identify trends without validating the current data collection method's effectiveness. Option D. Assessment of the organization's public relations efforts related to its environmental achievements rather than the underlying data accuracy. Correct answer is A. Verification that the data collection methodologies align with the specific environmental indicators and are consistently applied across all relevant operational units. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14030, 2019 regarding the assessment of environmental performance emphasizes a systematic and objective evaluation of an organization's environmental aspects and impacts. In conducting internal audits of environmental performance, a key consideration is ensuring the audit process itself is robust and contributes to the continuous improvement of the environmental management system. This involves verifying that the methods used for data collection and analysis are appropriate for the specific environmental indicators being tracked, such as greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption, or waste generation. The audit should also confirm that the organization's stated environmental objectives and targets, as defined in its environmental policy and program, are being effectively monitored, and that any deviations are identified and addressed through corrective actions. Furthermore, the audit must assess the competence of the auditors and the impartiality of the audit findings, ensuring that the evaluation is free from bias and based on verifiable evidence. The integration of relevant legal requirements, such as those mandated by the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act, into the audit scope is also crucial to ensure compliance and identify potential risks. The ultimate goal is to provide reliable information to management for decision-making and to foster a culture of environmental responsibility throughout the organization. Question 26. An industrial manufacturing firm, adhering to ISO 14030, 2019 guidelines, has conducted a comprehensive assessment of its operational environmental performance. The assessment revealed that a significant portion of its waste stream consists of non-recyclable composite materials used in product packaging. While current waste disposal practices meet the minimum requirements of national environmental protection laws, the firm is seeking to identify strategic opportunities for improvement that align with the proactive principles of ISO 14030, 2019. Which of the following actions would best represent a forward-looking approach to addressing this specific waste stream, moving beyond basic compliance? Option A. Investing in advanced waste segregation technologies to maximize the recovery of any potentially recyclable components within the composite materials. Option B. Negotiating bulk discounts with waste disposal contractors to reduce the per-unit cost of landfilling the composite waste. Option C. Conducting a comparative analysis of alternative packaging materials with a lower environmental impact, including their life cycle assessment and supply chain feasibility. Option D. Lobbying for changes in national legislation to reclassify composite materials as non-hazardous waste, thereby reducing regulatory scrutiny. The correct answer is A. Investing in advanced waste segregation technologies to maximize the recovery of any potentially recyclable components within the composite materials. Explanation: the core of identifying opportunities for improvement within an organization's environmental performance, as guided by ISO 14030, 2019, lies in a systematic analysis of its current activities and their associated environmental impacts. This standard emphasizes a proactive approach, moving beyond mere compliance with regulations like the European Union's Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, or national waste management directives. The process involves a thorough review of operational data, including energy consumption, water usage, waste generation, and emissions. Furthermore, it necessitates understanding the organization's value chain, from raw material sourcing to product end-of-life, to pinpoint areas where environmental performance can be enhanced. Key aspect is the integration of environmental considerations into strategic decision-making. This means not only identifying inefficiencies, but also exploring innovative solutions that can lead to reduced environmental footprints and potentially economic benefits. For instance, a company might discover through its performance assessment that its packaging material has a high carbon footprint. Instead of simply seeking to reduce the quantity, ISO 14030, 2019 would encourage exploring alternative, more sustainable materials, or redesigning the packaging to minimize material use and enhance recyclability, thereby addressing both environmental impact and potential regulatory pressures related to packaging waste. The focus is on a holistic view, where improvements are driven by a deep understanding of the organization's environmental interactions and a forward-looking strategy. Question 27. Consider a manufacturing firm, Ecoplastics, aiming to significantly reduce its water consumption in its production processes, a key environmental objective. To operationalize this objective, Ecoplastics is developing an environmental management program. Which of the following approaches best exemplifies the principles of ISO 14030, 2019 for creating such a program to achieve its water reduction targets? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive water audit to identify all points of water usage, establishing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, water reduction targets for each identified area, and assigning responsibility for implementing water-saving technologies and practices, with regular performance monitoring against these targets. Option B. Launching a public awareness campaign about water conservation, hoping that employee behavior changes will naturally lead to reduced consumption without specific operational adjustments or measurable targets. Option C. Investing in a large-scale water recycling plant without first conducting a detailed analysis of current water usage patterns or setting specific reduction targets, thus aiming for a significant reduction through a single large investment. Option D. Solely relying on existing regulatory compliance requirements for water discharge, assuming that meeting these minimum standards will automatically achieve the broader objective of reducing overall water consumption. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive water audit to identify all points of water usage, establishing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, smart water reduction targets for each identified area, and assigning responsibility for implementing water-saving technologies and practices, with regular performance monitoring against these targets. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019, Guideline for Assessing Environmental Performance, emphasizes the development of robust environmental management programs. These programs are crucial for translating an organization's environmental policy into actionable steps to achieve specific environmental objectives and targets. The core principle is to establish a systematic approach that integrates environmental considerations into an organization's operations and decision-making processes. This involves identifying significant environmental aspects, setting measurable objectives and targets, and then designing programs to achieve these. A key element is the linkage between the strategic intent objectives and the operational implementation programs. For instance, if an organization sets an objective to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a certain percentage, the environmental management program would detail the specific actions, resources, responsibilities, and timelines required to meet that target. This might include investing in energy-efficient technologies, optimizing logistics, or implementing waste reduction initiatives. The effectiveness of such programs is then monitored and reviewed, feeding back into the continuous improvement cycle mandated by environmental management standards. The development process must consider relevant legal and other requirements, stakeholder expectations, and the organization's overall business strategy to ensure program relevance and feasibility. Question 28. An industrial facility, following the guidelines of ISO 14030, 2019, for environmental performance assessment, notes a consistent downward trend in its energy consumption per manufactured unit over the past 3 fiscal years. Analysis of the operational data reveals no significant changes in the types of raw materials used or the overall production volume. Which of the following interpretations most accurately reflects the implications of this data within the framework of ISO 14030, 2019? Option A. The reduction in energy consumption per unit of production strongly suggests an enhancement in the organization's energy efficiency, likely driven by internal operational improvements or technological advancements. Option B. This trend indicates a potential shift in the product mix towards less energy-intensive items, which is a reporting anomaly rather than a true efficiency gain. Option C. The data points to an external regulatory change that mandates reduced energy input, irrespective of the organization's internal efforts. Option D. The observed decrease in energy usage per unit is primarily an artifact of fluctuating market demand, leading to less intensive production cycles. Correct answer is A. The reduction in energy consumption per unit of production strongly suggests an enhancement in the organization's energy efficiency, likely driven by internal operational improvements or technological advancements. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14030, 2019 in assessing environmental performance involves establishing a baseline and then tracking changes over time. When an organization observes a decrease in its reported energy consumption per unit of production, this indicates an improvement in energy efficiency. This improvement can be attributed to various factors such as technological upgrades, process optimization, or behavioral changes. The standard emphasizes the importance of understanding the context and potential drivers of these changes to ensure the data reflects genuine environmental performance enhancement, rather than external factors or shifts in reporting methodology. Therefore, identifying the specific initiatives that led to this reduction is crucial for validating the improvement and informing future environmental management strategies. Without this contextual understanding, the observed data point, while positive, lacks the depth required for comprehensive environmental performance assessment as envisioned by ISO 14030, 2019, which aims for verifiable and actionable insights. Question 29. When an industrial conglomerate, Veridian Dynamics, operating across multiple European Union member states, seeks to rigorously assess its Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions in alignment with ISO 14030, 2019, and has actively engaged in procuring renewable energy through long-term power purchase agreements, PPA, and the acquisition of certified renewable energy certificates, REC, for a significant portion of its electricity consumption, which data collection and calculation methodology will most accurately reflect its environmental performance under these specific procurement circumstances. Option A. Utilizing location-based emission factors derived from the average grid intensity of each member state where electricity is consumed, irrespective of procurement agreements. Option B. Implementing a hybrid approach that averages the results obtained from both location-based and market-based methodologies to provide a generalized emission profile. Option C. Relying solely on direct energy consumption data without applying any emission factors, as the energy is purchased and not directly generated. Option D. Employing a market-based approach that accounts for the specific emissions factors associated with the procured renewable energy sources under PPAs and RECs. The correct answer is D. Employing a market-based approach that accounts for the specific emissions factors associated with the procured renewable energy sources under PPAs and RECs. Explanation: ISO 14030, 2019 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations. A crucial aspect of this assessment is the reliable collection of environmental data. When an organization aims to evaluate its greenhouse gas emissions, particularly Scope 1, direct emissions from owned or controlled sources, and Scope 2, indirect emissions from the generation of purchased electricity, steam, heating, and cooling, a systematic approach is vital. For Scope 1, direct measurement or calculation based on activity data and emission factors is standard. For Scope 2, the choice of calculation methodology depends on the availability and reliability of purchased energy supplier data. If a supplier provides specific emissions data per unit of energy consumed, this is the most accurate method. If not, organizations typically use location-based emission factors, which represent the average emissions intensity of the grid in the location where the energy is consumed. However, market-based methods, which account for purchased electricity under specific contractual agreements like renewable energy certificates or power purchase agreements, offer a more granular and potentially lower emissions intensity if the organization has actively procured low-carbon energy. ISO 14030 emphasizes the importance of data quality, including accuracy, completeness, and consistency, regardless of the data collection method chosen. The selection of the most appropriate method for Scope 2 emissions, for instance, should consider the organization's purchasing strategies and the available data from energy providers, aiming for the most representative picture of its environmental impact. The question asks about the most suitable method for assessing an organization's Scope 2 emissions when specific contractual agreements for low-carbon energy procurement are in place. This directly points to the market-based method, as it reflects the actual energy consumed and its associated emissions, considering these specific agreements, rather than relying on average grid intensity. Question 30. An organization is conducting an environmental performance assessment for its manufacturing operations, focusing on water consumption and wastewater discharge quality, as mandated by national environmental protection regulations. They have collected extensive data from various plant units, including flow meter readings, laboratory analyses of effluent, and purchase records for water. To ensure the integrity of this assessment for reporting purposes, which of the following best describes the most effective approach to data validation and verification, considering the principles outlined in ISO 14030, 2019, and the need for regulatory compliance? Option A. Rely solely on automated data entry systems with built-in error checks to validate all collected information, and then present the data directly to regulatory authorities for their internal verification process without any prior independent review. Option B. Implement a multi-stage validation process involving cross-referencing data from different sources, e.g., flow meters against water purchase records, and employing statistical outlier detection, followed by an independent internal audit team's review of the methodologies and documented evidence before submitting the data for external verification by an accredited third-party body. Option C. Focus exclusively on the verification of the final report by an accredited third party, assuming that the data collection and initial processing steps are inherently accurate and do not require a separate validation phase or internal review. Option D. Conduct a single validation check on the final aggregated data by comparing it against the previous year's reported figures, and then engage a consulting firm with no specific accreditation for environmental verification to review the overall report. The correct answer is B. Implement a multi-stage validation process involving cross-referencing data from different sources, e.g., flow meters against water purchase records, and employing statistical outlier detection, followed by an independent internal audit team's review of the methodologies and documented evidence before submitting the data for external verification by an accredited third-party body. Explanation: ISO 14030 2019 emphasizes the critical role of robust data validation and verification in establishing the credibility of an organization's environmental performance assessment. The standard outlines that validation involves ensuring that the data collected accurately reflects the intended environmental aspects, and that the methodologies used are appropriate and consistently applied. Verification, on the other hand, is an independent examination of the data and the assessment process to confirm that they meet established criteria, often aligned with regulatory requirements or international standards. For instance, if an organization is reporting greenhouse gas emissions under a national cap-and-trade scheme, like the European Union Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, the data validation would involve checking the accuracy of emission factors, calculation methodologies, and the scope of activities included. The verification process would then be conducted by an accredited third-party verifier who reviews the documentation, conducts site visits if necessary, and provides an assurance statement on the reliability of the reported emissions. This process is crucial for maintaining stakeholder trust and ensuring compliance with legal obligations. Common pitfall in data validation is the reliance on outdated or inappropriate emission factors, which can lead to significant inaccuracies. In verification, a lack of clear audit trails or inadequate documentation of data sources can impede the process. Therefore, a comprehensive approach that integrates both validation and verification, with clear roles and responsibilities, is essential for a credible environmental performance assessment, aligning with principles found in regulations such as the European Union's Regulation, EU 2018/1999, on the governance of the Energy Union and climate action, which mandates reporting and verification of greenhouse gas emissions.